What is good, Dynasty Life crew? Your boy Stevie B here with my co-host, The Hammer, of course, and special guest tonight, Brett from Go Bills podcast. Brett, just introduce yourself and let everybody know where they could find you.
Yeah, so I'm Brett from the Go Bills podcast. We started our channel in 2019, and we've grown from just being a YouTube channel to going onto Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok now, and then Twitter as well. And then we also made our new website, gobillspodcast.com. We've been collaborating with a couple of other people as well, Nickel City Mafia and the Red, White, and Bills. And we're trying to just continue growing our show. So I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come on your channel and continue to grow, and look forward to working with you guys as well.
Yeah, man, appreciate you coming on. So we met doing what were we doing? A Fantasy Football Network. We met doing that and kind of just stayed in touch. And now that we're in the off season, especially, we focus on Dynasty fantasy football. So and we have some IDP leagues as well. So just getting a little more insight on the teams and people that are, in that network is awesome to have. So yeah, we appreciate you definitely for coming on.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, Brett, I got to ask you one of two questions before we dive into some more specific Bill stuff. Have you ever jumped through a flaming table while tailgating at a Buffalo Bills game?
I have not, but I promise you right now, and I'll mark my word on it, if the Bills win the Super Bowl this year, I will do it, and I will put it on an Instagram live for sure. And if they win the Super Bowl and it's, a blowout against like an NFC East team, I'll make sure that it's even bigger than you can possibly imagine. Just to get that monkey back, because I mean we lost to the
four straight,
every single team. And then I was so proud that we didn't make it last year because I didn't want to feel that that burden of facing the Eagles in the Super Bowl. So I was kind of glad about that, because I'm like, any other team that's in any other division I'm okay with, but just not the Eagles. So I can't face that burden again.
Yeah, fair enough. I just had to ask that because obviously, the Bills Mafia is notorious for doing a lot of crazy stuff. It gets broadcasted around the world. So just had to ask you that question off the top just to kind of break the ice, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, definitely. And then, did you have a second one? Did you have a second question?
No, that was it. I thought it was going to be a second question, but that was the only one so far.
Gotcha.
We got a few. We'll get into it. Crispy, what up? Thanks for tuning in, bro. Kevin, Jamie, what is good? We got the little buffaloes down there. Look at that.
That makes me happy. I can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Very passionate man.
So. Let's start with the draft, the NFL draft. I mean, some of your draft picks that you guys took. Dalton Kincaid, obviously a big name. We are excited in the Dynasty community about Kincaid. We hear that he might be lining up in the slot, but he is also a rookie. But yeah, what do you feel about Kincaid and that pick, in general?
Yeah, I think he's going to be more of like the Cole Beasley type of player, that he can fill that role. But I wouldn't put too much expectation on what he's going to do for the first year, just because in a Sean McDermott type of system that they run, especially with him running the team, I don't expect for Dalton Kincaid to have big numbers. But if you're playing in a dynasty league and you're looking for somebody that can get you some value in the years to come, I think that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a great player. Now, he's going to have to compete with Dawson Knox for his shares, which is something that concerns me. But Buffalo really doesn't have a slot receiver that they can go with. They lost Isaiah McKenzie as well this year. So I think that he's going to fit into the system very well. I'd expect him towards the second half of the year to really start to come on. And then I think that he's going to be more of like what James Cook was last year, maybe similar numbers in terms of the rushing yards that James Cook had to where the receiving yards that Dalton Kincaid will have. It'll be pretty similar, but I wouldn't put too high of expectations on him right now.
I think we all got really excited when we saw that pick. We were like, yeah, it's an awesome fit. He's going to be playing with a fantastic quarterback, obviously. Um, with the lack of, I guess, proven guys outside of Stephon Diggs, do you feel that he maybe could have a bigger impact sooner? Or do you still temper those expectations when you consider, the other receiving options that the Bills currently have?
Gabe Davis is going to have a bigger year than we expect from him. And I just think I just don't see where the rookies are going to have so much say on what they're going to do. They do have a guy in Khalil Shakur who's a second-year player who kind of had an impact in the playoffs as well. He's somebody that I really like, and I think that he's going to fill the slot position to start the year. But I think they're going to mix in a little bit of Dalton Kincaid as well as there's another guy that we just picked up too in Deontay Hardy, who is coming over from the New Orleans Saints. And I think that they're going to mix them in as well. And then you'll see Dalton Kincaid towards the second half of the year to start to come on. And this is a system that's very hard, especially with tight ends. This is a 2 tight end system that they're trying to run with Ken Dorsey. And over the last couple of years, the second tight end really hasn't done a lot for Buffalo. They've only gotten on the field about 30% of the time. So that's more of the 30% that they're using them with is more of the blocking side of it. And that's where I think that Dalton Kincaid will come into play a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be an excellent fantasy, especially dynasty pickup. I actually have, I think the 111 in a 14-team draft, and I'm kind of targeting him there. Obviously, we're not a super flex, so that might be a little tougher. But yeah, I think everybody's super excited about him being on that team.
Yeah, I mean, there's other positions that I like as well, but when we picked up Kincaid and got him away from Dallas, that made me pretty happy. Don't get me wrong. So I was happy with the pick. There's a couple of other guys that I was looking at, and I'm like, oh man, if we could get this guy or that guy, if Zay Flowers fell to Buffalo, I was looking forward to that, but that didn't happen. And a couple of the receivers that went ahead of Buffalo, I would have loved to have had, like Quentin Johnston. That's another receiver I really wanted as well, but I'm okay with the pick. I was really happy when it came out. And then when I started to see more of the film of what Kincaid can do, and the biggest thing that I looked at is yards after catch. And that's something that he can really bring to the Bills. And then he just looks like a bully out there. And it's something that the Bills have needed for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. Because I feel like, the Bills, I just feel like all they have is, Diggs. And it's like there's nobody else really there, to make plays. Like Gabe Davis, I'm a Gabe Davis hater. I'm sorry. I just feel like he hasn't done as good as we thought he should, especially in that kind of offense. He hasn't really stepped up. And maybe this year is the year that he does that. I just don't have a ton of confidence. I just feel like he's not the greatest route runner or gets as much separation as you would want. Great deep ball guy, of course. He's going to have you those huge games. But I feel like if they get one more kind of playmaker, it would be ideal. Speaking of the DeAndre Hopkins talks that's been going around, he's available. What do you think, about the whole DeAndre Hopkins situation and what that would bring, to an offense like the Bills?
I would love to have him in Buffalo. I really would. I just don't think that with the cap space that Buffalo can manage to do that. Now, Buffalo did extend Ed Oliver to a 4-year contract, which gives us a little bit of flexibility. We can move some numbers around, but I just don't think that, number one, DeAndre Hopkins wants to come to Buffalo because he wants a big contract. He's already said that he doesn't want to worry about playing with an elite quarterback, and he wouldn't take a hometown discount for that type of situation. So I think that he's more about the money, and that's where I think teams like even Dallas or other teams in those situations would come into play. Now, I just don't think that Buffalo is going to be in play. A team that I will say is a sleeper for DeAndre Hopkins is the New York Giants. I really do think that they have a really good team around them. They just don't have the number one wide receiver that they need, and they're an up-and-coming team. You got Brian Dable, who came over from Buffalo. He's really building the team up. You got Saquon Barkley as well. And I just think that they're one player away from having a really good team that can make a deep run in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up Brian Dable, and that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you in relation to Josh Allen. Now, I know obviously Josh Allen's amazing. We know exactly what he is, what he brings to the table, but looking at last year and Josh Allen with a lot of the turnovers and the interceptions, I know that was a big deal that was made with his interception rate going up. Do you think that was a product of Brian Dable not being there? Do you think that was a product of him just forcing it? Like, what do you think the correlation to that was?
I think it's more him forcing the ball into situations. I think that last year towards it really came into play in the Minnesota game, and then it came into play again when they were playing the Green Bay Packers. I felt like that was the turning point in the season where Josh Allen just tried to force the ball into situations that he didn't need to. He wasn't taking what the defense was giving him enough, and he just needed to just check the ball down to different receivers. There really wasn't a slot receiver that he could count on once Jamison Crowder and even Isaiah McKenzie was on the field. Isaiah McKenzie is more of he does good in man coverage, but we were playing teams that had zone coverage schemes. And that's why I think Buffalo moved on from Isaiah McKenzie and they moved into getting Deontay Hardy, just because he can fill that slot position in the zone coverage that you see. And he can also do it in man coverage as well. So he brings a different aspect to the team. But he just seems like he was pressing the ball down the field, and he needed to use his running backs a little bit more. And I think towards the second half of the season, when he saw that guys like James Cook were going off, and even Devin Singletary, who had a really good year, but unfortunately we weren't able to re-sign him. He ended up going to the Texans, and I think he's going to have a monster year there. But just to put all the weight on his shoulders, I think he just tried to force the ball down the field, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting how, especially with these Superman type quarterbacks, is it, yeah, we want to put everything on his shoulders, or do we kind of want to, get the ball out of his hands quick and, not necessarily negate what he does well, but not have to put everything on his shoulders? It's kind of, I'm a huge Packers fan, so I felt the same way when they had Aaron Rodgers. It's like, yeah, we want him to do everything, but then again, we want him to get the ball out quick, get everybody involved, all that thing. So I think there was really a balance, a balancing act of that going on there with Josh Allen last year.
Yeah, it's tough because Josh is still young. If you think about it, he's only 26 years old, or actually 27 now. So he's young. He is mobile. You know what he's going to do. He's going to try and play the hero ball. He's going to try and win games. He's going to try and jump over defenders, which is something that we all love. It's a Sports Center highlight that you see every time. We love to see that. But inside of me, being a Bills fan, I worry about that because you're exposing yourself to injuries, number one. And he's not going to be able to do that forever. You're going to have to give him a really good running back like a Saquon Barkley or even a Christian McCaffrey, somebody that can catch the ball out of the backfield and just be a security blanket. So I think that if we can extend the lifespan of Josh Allen being in Buffalo by getting it to him earlier in his career, it only makes sense, because I don't think he's going to play into his 40s like Tom Brady did. I don't think he's going to be at 45 years old playing in Buffalo in the cold weather. And I know you guys know it, being a Packers fan, playing in that cold weather, especially being an older quarterback,
takes its toll on you. Yeah.
Toll on you. Yeah. Your body's not going to recover as fast. Number one. Number two, you're exposing yourself to getting hurt even more. I'm 26 years old. I go up to Buffalo when I do, and, I'm in that cold weather, and geez, I feel aches and pains in my body all the time. It's not fun.
Can't wait to get out of there and get to some warmer-ish weather, I can imagine.
Exactly. Patrick said, I think I like Damian Harris more than James Cook. Am I wrong? Yeah, that's a tough one, because Damian Harris could be that goal line guy that's banging stuff in, especially if they want Josh Allen to run a little bit less, take a little bit less beating. But then on the other hand, there's nobody else really there. So James Cook getting the receiving work, if you're in full PPR, that could be valuable if he's getting, 30, 40 yards through the air, another 30, 40 yards on the ground, if not more. But yeah, what do you think about the running back situation now with Harris and Cook? And is there anybody else there that maybe we should keep an eye on or we should think about?
Yeah, I think it's really a three-headed tandem right now. Buffalo didn't pick up anybody in the draft, which is kind of surprising. I know there's a lot of talk of Bijan Robinson coming to Buffalo, but I think the Buffalo just wanted to go another direction. And Atlanta, give them credit. They went after Bijan early in the draft. I was really happy that they did because I didn't want a running back. I was more concerned about getting a guard or even an offensive tackle early in the draft. But Buffalo was able to sign Latavius Murray after the draft, which is another guy that, I mean, if you look at what he did in Denver last year, he had some really good numbers. And I think that the three-headed tandem of Damian Harris, James Cook, and Latavius Murray are going to do some really good things. And they bring different aspects to the team in different ways. You got Damian Harris, who's more of the goal line back. You have James Cook, who's more of the home run type of back. And then you have Latavius Murray, who's just the guy that can get you 4 or 5 yards on a carry and move the chains every single time. So if I had to put him in order of who would I draft first, this is going to be, I'm going to do it for Dynasty, and then I'll do it for, just regular fantasy play. I would say for Dynasty, you're going after James Cook and then Damian Harris, and then I'm grabbing Latavius Murray. And that's if he even makes the roster too. So Latavius Murray might not even make the roster. If I'm going with a normal fantasy play type of situation, I might grab Damian Harris a little earlier than James Cook. Now that's a little controversial, don't get me wrong. But I think that if you look at Damian Harris, what he did with New England a few years back, he had 15 touchdowns in a season. So I think that's very doable for the Buffalo Bills. I think that when Buffalo gets into the red zone, which is something that we struggled with last year, we weren't able to just get the ball into the end zone because all we had was Stephon Diggs. You can now run the ball and have Damian Harris get you the extra yards and get into the end zone. So if you're looking for somebody that can get you touchdowns and win you a league, maybe you can put him in the flex option. Damian Harris might be a good move for you.
Yeah, I really like the combination of all three guys, as you said, because they all bring a little something different. And full disclosure, Steve loves him some Latavius Murray. He loves that guy to death. It's hilarious.
Oh, he does everything. He can run, he can catch, he does it all. So I would expect like Damian Harris to be the first and second down guy, James Cook to be the passing down and third down guy, and then Latavius Murray to just come in, whenever, give some guys a break. Or if one of those guys went down, he can support either of those roles, which that's what I really like about Latavius Murray.
I think he could even fall on the practice squad, which is something that would be a little surprising. I think of all the backs, that he could be the one that ends up going to the practice squad in a similar role to what Duke Johnson did a few years ago with Buffalo. So, I mean, could happen where he doesn't even make the roster. And there's a couple of other players on the roster that if they have a really good training camp, they could make the roster too. So
is there someone else maybe we should be looking at that could take that third running back spot?
Yeah, there's another guy. He's an undrafted free agent. I can never remember his first name, but his last name is Mims. I think it's Jordan Mims is his name. Okay. He's somebody that he looks like a home run threat. I've watched the film on him. Looks really good. It's just a matter of can he take it from the college level and bring it to the NFL. So that,
and you guys also still have Nyheim Hines, correct?
That's true. Yeah.
So yeah. I know they brought him in on a trade last year. Who I thought he was going to be the passing down guy, and then obviously James Cook kind of emerged down the stretch. So that's also another guy to factor in, who's a proven kind of third down receiving type back. So that running back room is loaded.
Yeah, I think about Nyheim Hines. I don't think he's going to be a running back with Buffalo. I really don't. I think it's just, if you look at last year, we didn't utilize him enough, and we got him pretty early on, before the trade deadline. We moved Zach Moss and got him, but I think he's more of the kickoff return specialist. And, last year he had 2 touchdowns in one game, which I was thrilled because it was the game after DeMar's incident that happened. So getting the 2 touchdowns made me really happy, but I hope that we can utilize him a little bit more on offense too.
Yeah, I think he does add a nice dynamic ability. Obviously, we saw what he did with the Colts for a while, and I was very surprised, like you said, that they didn't utilize him more than they did, considering they actually made a trade for him. You would think they would, kind of put his talents to good use. But, listen, if you could get anything in the special teams category, then that's always a bonus.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Now, I know there's been talks, of course, of my Minnesota Vikings possibly releasing, Dalvin Cook, and one of the teams that he's been tied to is the Buffalo Bills, amongst the Dolphins, and I think maybe another team or two. But those were kind of the two outstanding teams, the Bills and the Dolphins. Then you'd have both Cook brothers. Do you think this is a possibility? And do you think they should go out and get a guy like Dalvin Cook?
To be honest with you, I just don't think that he'd be utilized enough in the Bills' offense. I think that a team like the Miami Dolphins is a team that he should go to. Now, having both Cook brothers in Buffalo, that would be great because you got I don't know if you watched many of the Bills games, but there's two guys that are in the stands every single week, and they're wearing their chef hats every single week, and they're front row every single time. So I just want to see what they would do because, you got the Cook brothers, now you have the Chef brothers and everything. It would just be great for Buffalo, but I just don't see where they would utilize him enough to make it worth spending, $10-15 million on a running back that's, he's a great running back, don't get me wrong, but we just wouldn't utilize him enough. So I think that the running back room is set in Buffalo, and that's why I think we went after Latavius Murray rather than going after a guy like Dalvin Cook. So I just don't see it happening, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I actually agree with that, and I think the fact that they brought in a Damian Harris and obviously Latavius Murray, there doesn't feel like there's enough carries to go around if you bring in a guy like Dalvin. So I totally agree with that. I think Miami kind of feels like a good spot considering what Miami has in the running back room. A couple of some older veteran guys that tend to get hurt a lot. I think you'd be more valuable there from a fantasy perspective and a football perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't want him to go to Miami. Don't get me wrong. I know that
right. in your division, right?
Right. And this comment from Jake Podger as well. He's one of the guys from Nickel City Mafia. If you haven't talked to him ever, you got to talk to this kid because he looks exactly like Josh Allen. I'm telling you, he's Josh Allen. Like I don't know if
doppelganger.
You know. Oh yeah. So he asked Andre Reed if he looked like Josh Allen, and he said yes, but he looks like a different version of Josh Allen than what he said. You got to watch the video with Andre Reed. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to catch that. I saw would you guys have an interview with Reed?
They did, and they're running a special right now where the Bills are going to play in London, and they're doing a travel package where you can go and meet Andre Reed in London. So it's a really cool package with Big Game. I can never think of what it's called. It's Big Game, whatever it's called, but they're running a special on Nickel City Mafia. So if you haven't already, go out there and check out the opportunity to go and meet Andre in London.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Speaking of the defense here, now you guys lost Tremaine Edmonds.
Right.
Now, what is going on now with that defense with the linebackers? Did you guys address that in the draft? Who should we be looking at to take that place? Because some of us do play in some of these IDP leagues. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm one of the guys that plays in IDP leagues. I even run a regular fantasy football draft where, when we're drafting fantasy football, and when it comes to, we don't do the Dynasty league, but I've done a Dynasty league. We're drafting every single player, including punters, which is something that's, punters are very valuable. So, before we used to get like Pat McAfee, I freaking loved him. He was a great punter, but we draft kick returners, we draft punt returners, everything you can possibly imagine is so much fun. But guys on the defense that you need to look out for. Dorian Williams, he's the guy that we just grabbed in the draft coming in, playing for I can't even think of the name of the school. Where did he just go? It was in school that I want to say it's Temple. I might be wrong when I say it, but we just picked him up, and I mean, he had a monster year last year, and he's somebody that can fill that middle linebacker position. A little bit smaller than Tremaine Edmonds, though, but I think the biggest thing that he brings to Buffalo is his speed. He runs a 4.4 40, which is something that Tremaine didn't do. Tremaine, to me, seemed like, and I don't know if you guys watched any of the games, but it seemed like Tremaine was just a little bit slow to react to if it was a pass player, if it was a run game, and hit the holes. That's one thing that I really was looking for the next running back, is if you can be able to hit the holes and tackle somebody in the backfield, which is something that Tremaine didn't do. Now, do I blame that on Tremaine or do I blame that on the coaching? I blame that more on the coaching, because I believe that with Tremaine, you're utilizing him as a middle linebacker to cover the middle of the field. So his first job is to drop back and get in coverage. So thank you. Tulane, that's the school I was thinking of. I couldn't remember if it was Temple or Tremaine. Tulane. There's too many schools with T's out there now. So you got Texas A&M, Texas. You got all these different schools, and it just blows my mind.
All kinds of crazy stuff.
Making a name for themselves with Sonny Dykes too. So just couldn't remember the name of the school, but I mean, he's the guy that I'm looking forward to. He's going to be competing with Terrell Bernard as well as Tyrell Dodson for the starting middle linebacker position. I really do think that he will win it. And then you got guys like even for the number 2 cornerback position, you got Dame Jackson versus Kaiir Elam, which is, I believe, is going to be a really good matchup, because Dame Jackson a couple of years ago was filling in for Levi Wallace, and he comes in, has a monster year, puts up some really good numbers when Tre'Davious White was out as well, and he filled that number 1 cornerback position. But then you bring in a first-round pick, and you have Kaiir Elam, who had an up and down year for Buffalo, and we can see what he could do next year if he's going to play opposite of Tre'Davious, and if Tre'Davious even has a great year next year, which is something that's a little bit concerning because of the ACL injury. So those are 2 areas that I really think that Buffalo is going to have some really good training camp battles. And then even the defensive line, we lost a couple of guys there as well. And I think that we've rebuilt the defensive line with guys like Puna Ford, who's this 5'11", 310-pound defensive tackle who's, if you haven't seen his picture, if you look him up on Google, I'm telling you, funniest picture, he has his shirt up and he's just dancing, like he has his belly like this, just going, all happy and everything, just dancing. He's a guy that I really think is going to have a good year with Buffalo. And we just brought back Jordan Phillips as well. He was hurt with the hamstring injury. He's somebody that I think is going to step up and have a monster year for Buffalo as well. And then returning Vaughn, having Vaughn back, which is going to be big. He might return week 1, which is something that would be really surprising with the ACL injury. So I think there's some really good players to get in the IDP leagues. Vaughn would be my number 1. Number 2 would be Greg Russo on that defensive line, because I think Greg is going to have a really good year opposite of Vaughn. I think you're going to see Vaughn slow into the game. Not being able to play for a while is something that hurts him a little bit, but I think he'll come into the game a little slow, and then you'll see Greg Russo get some sacks, and then Vaughn will start to pick it up towards the second half of the year.
That's what I was going to get ready to ask you and transition it to how much do you think Vaughn has left in the tank?
To be honest with you, 2-3 years left. I really do think that. He signed a 6-year contract with Buffalo, but I just don't see him playing that much longer. Now, when it came down to the 2011 draft, when it was Cam Newton, Von Miller, and then Marcel Darius goes 3, I really thought that the Denver Broncos were going to go after Marcel Darius, and then Buffalo was going to pick Von Miller. Now, that didn't happen, but I was praying. I'm like, as soon as Denver got on the clock, I'm like, man, just please pick Darius, because I know he's going to be a bust. Sure enough, Buffalo picks him. Didn't have a great career. He had a decent career, don't get me wrong, but I knew he wasn't going to live up to Von's hype.
He wasn't Von Miller, that's for sure.
He wasn't Von. So
I really thought, to be honest with you, when they signed Von Miller from the Rams, I thought he was really going to get them over the top because it felt like when he got there, especially in the AFC, we all know all of these quarterbacks, Mahomes, Burrow, you could go down the list. It seemed like they had the offense to do it. They needed that defensive line, that closer kind of on that defensive line, as you saw Von Miller do in the Super Bowl when the Rams beat the Bengals. Von Miller basically, and Aaron Donald obviously basically closed that out. So I really thought 2 years ago that they brought him in 2 years ago, correct?
They brought him in last year.
Last year. So I really thought he would be able to kind of get them over the top from that defensive standpoint.
Yeah, I thought for sure that bringing him in, I mean, if you looked at the beginning of the year when the first couple of games where we shut out the Rams pretty much. I mean, everybody thought that we were going to get blown out. We took care of them real quickly. Then week 2, another great game, ended up winning that one, and then week 3 when Micah Hyde went down, and then Jordan Poyer was hurt as well. I mean, you could just see that the team wasn't going to be the same because losing Tre'Davious White, losing Micah Hyde, those are 2 major factors to a secondary that you're not going to be the same as without those guys. And then you bring in DeMar really didn't hit the field that much. And I think it was his first couple of games that he played in his career just even get into. So we brought in Jaquan Johnson. We also had Cam Lewis, who was a converted cornerback to safety, and it just wasn't the same. So I think that this year what you're going to see is if Vaughn comes back early on in the season and you have a healthy Jordan Poyer, you have a healthy Micah Hyde, healthy Tre'Davious White, even an upgrade, in my opinion, over Levi Wallace on the other side in either Dane Jackson or Kyer Elam, I think that you're going to see a big difference in the team. And I think that they're going to compete for the number 1 defense this year just because of what we have now. And we have a lot of continuity compared to other teams on defense as well.
Marty says, only Bills game I remember last year was the Vikings. He's a Vikings fan as well, Marty, my boy. That was a crazy game, though. I thought it was over, and I was like,
that was a hell of a game.
What the fuck just happened? But yeah,
the one-handed catch by Diggs, I said that's going to be SportsCenter's top play of the week. And then the Justin Jefferson one, that pissed me off so badly because damn well, and if you're a Vikings fan, you'll admit it. If you're a true fan of the NFL in general, that ball should have been caught by Cam Lewis, in my opinion.
I thought in real game speed, I thought it was intercepted. I was like, there's no way.
I said there's no way that he caught that ball. And then, I mean, if you look at it, how he caught that ball, there is a 0% chance that he should have caught that ball, number 1, because the cornerback had 2 hands on the ball, and all he had to do was knock it out. I mean, you just push that ball out, and it's done. But credit to Justin Jefferson. I'll give him all the credit in the world. That was a hell of a catch. He ate up the Bills in that game. He really did. There wasn't a cornerback on the field that could have covered him. There's a cornerback that was hurt that probably could have covered him better than the cornerbacks that were in the game, and that's Tre'Davious White. But in that situation, I mean, I don't think anybody on the Bills in that game could have covered him.
Yeah, that was a hell of a game, and there's always you get at least 2 or 3 of those kind of games every year where you could go on a show a year later and remember exactly what happened because it was that good of a game.
Yeah, that was one of the games that I was looking forward to, and Buffalo disappointed a little bit. I think the defense was a little too conservative, and they needed to be more aggressive, and that's probably why even Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator, left, just because I think that there wasn't enough aggression in the team overall.
Yeah. Jake was saying, we'll talk about how often he was double teamed. In addition, he was playing banged up. Who were we talking about there? I don't remember.
I'm pretty sure it's Ed Oliver that he's talking about there.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm almost positive he's talking about Ed because it doesn't seem like he's talking about Vaughn in that situation, even though Vaughn, I don't believe Vaughn was hurt until after the ACL injury, so I think he's talking about Ed.
Marty said it was 4th down, right? DB should have punched it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you know what? Sometimes when you, especially as a as an athlete, sometimes when you get into that situation, like your initial instinct is to intercept it. So you have to make that mental note, to realize the situation and understand that the best thing to do is knock it down in that situation. But
Yeah. Now, in that situation, he tried to make a play on the ball instead of knocking it down. Would you agree that that's more of a selfish move than anything else? Would you say it's more about him getting the interception versus
yes.
the team?
Yes and no. I don't want to say that he has bad football IQ, but I want to say that it's a possibility that in his mind it didn't even recollect to bat that ball down. And you can say, listen, as an athlete, as someone even who watches the game, okay, the best thing to do here is bat it down. But maybe he wasn't thinking that way. Maybe nobody did remind him. Maybe he wasn't aware it was 4th down. I mean, we don't know what could have happened. But yeah, if he knows that, then yeah, definitely that would be something selfish. But to be fair, these guys want to make a career for themselves,
Right.
and you need to make every play that you can make to try and support your family and get yourself a contract. So, at the same time, there's kind of that way that you look at it too. And, in the end, obviously it cost them what you probably thought it wouldn't have cost them anything. And who knows?
And my take on it is more of, listen, when you're an athlete, and listen, we're not professional athletes, but we've all played sports at some level, organized out in the park. When you're out there, you kind of get tunnel vision, right? And things are moving so fast, and your testosterone's going, your adrenaline's going, everything's happening. So to me, I thought it was just a reaction. Like, your natural instinct as a cornerback is to go up and grab the ball. Now, obviously, you want that IQ in that stage of the game to be able to separate and say, all right, all I need to do is bat the ball down here. But I think it was more a case of he was just doing what he normally does instinctually, and it just so happened that Justin Jefferson's amazing and went up and made the catch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree with you there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to zoom out a little bit. Steve and I did we did an episode where we talked about the AFC East and the kind of transformation that's happened with that division over the last 2 years or so. Now, obviously, after Tom Brady leaves New England, we all looked at Buffalo, obviously with the emergence of Josh Allen, and said it's the Bills division for as long as Josh Allen's there. Obviously, the emergence of Tua, Miami has a really good team, and then the Jets land the big fish in Aaron Rodgers. How do you see this division shaping up where it looked like it's going to be a lot more competitive than maybe it was 2 years ago?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that it's going to be harder to win the division, number one, because you have Aaron Rodgers and you have a team in the Jets who they have everything on paper to beat the Bills. They just need to put it all together. They need their coach to put together a game plan in order to beat Buffalo. And then you have another team in the Miami Dolphins who have a really good team as well. They just haven't put it all together for 4 quarters in order to beat the Bills. But I think that the division is really up for grabs because this is the year, in my opinion, that it's a 3-man race. It could be the Jets, it could be the Dolphins, or it could be Buffalo. And I'm not going to take away from what New England has done as well. New England has a really good team, and they also have Bill Belichick, who's one of the best coaches of all time. I'd put him right up there with Bill Walsh as best head coach ever to play in the game, and even Don Shula. So I just think that it's going to be harder to win the division. I still think that it's the Bills' division to lose, in my opinion, just because Josh Allen is the best quarterback in that division right now. I think that Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, but you don't know what version of Aaron Rodgers you're going to see. Is it going to be the MVP form that you saw 2 years ago, or is it going to be the form of Aaron Rodgers that we saw last year where he took a little bit of a step back? He missed receivers. He didn't get on the same page with his offense, and they didn't put up a lot of points. So it just depends on what you're going to see. But do I think that the Bills are going to win all 6 games in the division? Absolutely not. I think that they're going to split between the Dolphins and the Jets. And I think that they could even split between the New England Patriots too. The Patriots have a really good team on paper as well. They have two really good linebackers in Uche and Judon, who it seems like every time that the Bills play Matthew Judon, he gets hurt. So that's one thing that's always good for Buffalo. But if he plays throughout the whole entire game, he has 2-3 sacks throughout the whole entire game. So I think that it's going to be a little harder to see what is going to happen with the division. I think it's going to come down to week 16 or 17 for the Bills. So, well, not week 16, 17, but game 16 or 17 for the Bills.
Yeah, I feel that because one of my things with with that division, and I think I predicted, the Bills actually to possibly be third in that division is like you mentioned with Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets and the team that they have. And, Aaron Rodgers is a guy that wins games and does not turn the ball over much. And they do have a really good defense. So there's a good chance they win a lot of games, this season. And I do think we maybe see the MVP Rodgers. I think it's a new, great thing for him. He's enjoying everything about New York. He's learning with some young kids, and he feels like he's the man, which I think in Green Bay sometimes it got a little bit like, all right, Aaron, like what the fuck, like, you think who you are. Where now it's kind of like a whole new team, a whole new everything for him, so he can be kind of reborn. And he's got, obviously a great wide receiver in Garrett Wilson there, who he admires and says, is kind of like Devontae Adams and some of the routes and stuff that he runs and is able to do. So I'm excited for the Jets, and I think there's a good chance they're really good. And then you had mentioned the Patriots, who I think as well might take another step up. I think Mac Jones has a better season this year. I know they finally got an offensive coordinator now. I do think that they're going to be a good spot as well. And then, of course, the Dolphins, if Tua is healthy, I mean, shit, we've seen what they can do when that guy is healthy. So it's a really good division. And like you said, it's kind of, up for grabs. I think, the Bills still, we expect them to win because of what they've done and how far they've gone so far. But I still want, like, they need a D-Hop kind of guy. They need that extra playmaker. Like, that's one thing I just that bothers me about the Bills, especially once you get into the playoffs, as we saw when you're now facing all these other great teams that are in that conference. Now, you guys, I just feel like they need something else. It can't just be Diggs because it's not working with just Diggs, Yeah,
I completely agree. And if you look at last year in the playoffs, it came down to double teaming Diggs and then putting your number one cornerback on Gabe Davis, and that never worked. So, I mean, it doesn't matter who you put on Diggs if it wasn't the number one cornerback every single time. If you look back at the games, they put their number two cornerback on him and just put a safety over the top to cover him. That never worked. Then it led to the middle of the field being open, and I said it in the Cincinnati game. I said the middle of the field is wide open. We have not hit the middle of the field. If we would have hit the middle of the field, whether it be a running back or a even Isaiah McKenzie or Dawson Knox, we would have competed more in that game. But we just didn't see it. And when we did see it, it was the second half, and we were behind by 14 points. And it just never works. So it's hard to catch up, especially being down as much as we were down.
So I know 2-3 years ago, the Buffalo Bills were kind of like that darling team where everybody expected them to kind of ascend, break through. They were on that trajectory to kind of go to the Super Bowl, break through, etc. Do you feel like people are kind of undervaluing them now because they quote unquote think that window is closed? And do you think their window is closing or closed, or any of that kind of phraseology?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that the Bills overall, their window is closing. Now, I actually brought up this question on my channel before, and a few of the other guys said, no, I don't think the window's closing. But you look at other teams in the AFC. I mean, there's 8 other teams that can easily win the Super Bowl in the AFC. I mean, you got Kansas City every single year. You got Cincinnati. You got Buffalo. Even the Jets.
Ravens.
The Ravens, exactly.
Chargers.
Yeah, the Chargers.
And sneaky Jaguars, too. Don't forget about the Jags.
Yeah, the Jags are going to be good, too. So I would say of those teams, I mean, it's really any man's race to win the division. So I think the window has closed. I think that the year that the Bills could have won it was last year or the year before. I really do think that. And I think that we just overall we couldn't finish it out mentally. And that's one thing that the Bills need to do a better job is being mentally stable in the playoffs. And you've seen what happens. I'm going to say something that's a little controversial for Bills fans to even hear. Josh Allen, when it comes to the big moments, his nerves get the best of him. And you've seen it in games in the playoffs. If you look back, the Kansas City game, he threw the ball at Chris Jones, got the best of him. You look at the game against the Dolphins, where it wasn't even in the playoffs, but against the Dolphins, he was going after Christian Wilkins, and he got those emotions got the best of him. Now, we did get the win in that situation, which was great, but games like that, it's just the things that as a leader you need to just take away from that and get your men together. If you look at a guy like Joe Montana, look back to when he was in the Super Bowl and how calm he was, where he was just pointing out John Candy in the stands. That's the type of situation that you need to be in, where you need to be a leader and just calm your men down, march down the field, get the touchdown, win the Super Bowl or win the game, rather than put all your emotions into everything that's off, not involving football and worrying about that. So that's one thing that bothered me a lot about Josh is he just has too much of it's a roller coaster at times, and his emotions, like I said, get the best of him. And it's one thing I don't like, but I love the kid overall. He's a great person. He represents Buffalo very well. So I'm not bad mouthing Josh in any way. It's just the emotions and everything.
In the big moments, you need it
a little bit more.
Well, listen. Speaking of, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I totally kind of gravitate to that point because as a Packers fan, we've had a generational quarterback. Forget about Brett Favre, but over the last 10 plus years, we've had such a generational quarterback in my more recent, obviously, recent memory where you've had that generational quarterback and you're knocking on the door. It happened once for us, so the feeling isn't quite the same.
Right.
But overall, having that type of quarterback, you kind of expected more. So to kind of answer my own question, I don't think your window's closed because when you do have that generational guy at that position, you always have a chance. Now, the unfortunate thing for the Bills is, like we talked about, you can name 8 other teams in that conference where in any given year it can happen. So the ball's just going to have to bounce your way. But yes, a really interesting perspective and something I kind of understand having Rodgers on my team for the last, 15 plus years.
No, I don't think the window is completely closed. I think that, like I said, it's just the opportunity to win it has closed.
It feels different. Yeah.
It's just different because now you're going to have to go through either Cincinnati or Kansas City this year. That's going to be tough. Kansas City and Cincinnati have both upgraded, in my opinion, this year. I mean, and then if you even get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to play either, it could be the 49ers or it could be the Eagles. I mean, Dallas is going to be up there too. I think Dallas has a really good team, even though I do think that Dallas has they've gotten a little worse on their team overall. But there's
agree.
The NFC that, they can compete for the Super Bowl, and it's not going to be an easy matchup for the Bills. It's just a matter of if we get there, do we think that we will win it? And that's going to be tough. It's going to be some tough opportunities. But I will say this before I let you guys go. Buffalo is going to play Cincinnati in the regular season. They're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season, and they're also going to play Dallas and the Eagles. So that's a good opportunity to see what they have. So, you could lose
outside of the tough division that we just talked about.
Exactly. So that's 4 games that Buffalo could lose, and they might not even make the playoffs. Now, I do think they will make the playoffs, don't get me wrong, but you just have to play the devil's advocate on things and just think about there's 4 top teams that they're going to play. And what's the media going to say if Buffalo loses all 4 of those games? Buffalo can't compete with the big teams.
Yep.
That's what it's going to come down to. And if Buffalo gets there, they're not going to show up in the playoffs. That's what's going to come down to. So,
now, do you think, speaking of Josh Allen and some of the decision making and stuff like that, do you think sometimes the way that he feels like all the pressure is on him because they don't have any other weapons other than Diggs, and if he can't get Diggs the football, he's trying to do too much because he kind of has like no other choice?
I think it's not just Diggs. I think that the pressure last year with a number first year offensive coordinator, I think that the pressure was trying to force the ball down the field too much. And I think that came down to Ken Dorsey and what he wanted to do. I think the object of the game was when you're up, press the ball down the field. Just try and press the ball down the field as much as possible. And I think that what you're going to see with Ken Dorsey this year is more of try and get the ball to your playmakers and get yards after the catch. Because Buffalo was last in yards after the catch. That's an important category, in my opinion, in football, is making sure that you're up there in yards after the catch, because now you're giving your playmakers an opportunity to catch the ball, turn upfield, and get as many yards as you can downfield. So I just think that overall Buffalo with Ken Dorsey, there's something that happened towards the second half of the year where defenses figured out what he was running. And they need to make it more complex of a system and not make it about Brian Daboll's system. Just make it about what Ken Dorsey can do. Because I think at the beginning of the year, it was just about Ken Dorsey's system. Then they tried to implement some of what Ken Dorsey wanted to do, and then it just became difficult. So I want to see what Buffalo can really do this year with a second-year coach that understands the game a little bit more and is able to see what defenses are doing against him and make the necessary changes to start to win games by more than a field goal or even a touchdown. Because I'm telling you guys, last year, I think there was about 10 games that were one-possession games. And I'm telling you, throughout the whole entire game, my stress level went from nothing to something very fast, and I cannot take it for another year. I'm going to get gray hairs, and I'm going to lose all my freaking hair.
So. Dude, it's so we feel that everything. That's just the life of a hardcore NFL fan. You just accept it, and you're just so stressed out every week, especially when you get into the playoffs and those later rounds. But yeah, I totally feel that. Stressed out, throwing stuff, NFC Championship game, AFC Championship game, and you're just out of your mind.
And it's never easy to, I always say this. I don't live in Buffalo personally, but I mean, I know plenty of Bills fans. I know that the hard feeling of trying to go to work the next day after losing a Bills game, it's never fun. Especially if you're losing to a division rival. That's never fun. But being a Bills fan and the 5-11 seasons and the 2-14 seasons that we've had, it freaking sucks the whole entire week until Sunday. And then when Sunday comes on and you're watching the game, it's great for the 3 hours, unless they lose. Then it's a freaking miserable. I'm just going to tell you that right now, you're freaking miserable, and you know damn well how it is being a fan of Green Bay. You have a few years where you've had 13-3 seasons. Listen, you're lucky.
But also the expectation, right? Because they were the number 1 seed for a while. And I don't want to stray too far from your stuff, but it's kind of relatable where you're now that when you're the hunted instead of the hunter, it's a whole different ball game because you're the number 1 seed. You got the home advantage. You got the transcendent quarterback. You're expected to win now.
Right.
And when it doesn't happen, it's just such a gut punch.
But I do think that the pressure is off of Buffalo right now. I think
I would agree.
The Super Bowl champions. The Super Bowl champions are the Jets. You can just mark my word. The New York Post is going to post about it. They've won the Super Bowl. They won the offseason. They won everything. They're the Super Bowl champions for the next 35 years because they have Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers will be 77 years old, still winning the Super Bowl. That's just what they want to see, you know? But, you know, that's not the case. It's what team shows up on the field. So, you know, I do think that the pressure is off of Buffalo, which is great, especially with all the emotions that Buffalo had last year with the situation with DeMar. And then, I mean, I can name a bunch. You had your head coach who had cancer that many people didn't even know about. He had skin cancer. Your owner who ends up, she was in the hospital. She had a cardiac arrest before even DeMar even had cardiac arrest. That was before the season even started. So she was in the hospital. She's still in rehab, and many people don't even know about that. Then you have Dane Jackson to begin the year, where Dane was transported to the hospital during a game as well with a neck injury. Now, he was okay. He walked out of the hospital early in the year. That's something else that you can take into effect. Dawson Knox, his brother died. And then you have the DeMar situation and all the emotion that took on the team. And I just think that overall, losing Von Miller too, that's another big blow to the team. There's many big blows that happened, and even the Matt Ariza situation that happened before the season too. Those are just things that you can think about throughout the whole entire season, and these aren't excuses for why Buffalo didn't win the Super Bowl or didn't make it there. It's just things that you can think about as to were the Bills just emotionally, were they not there? Because that's a ton to go through as a team throughout the whole entire season. And I think that the emotions just of the game and the emotions of everything that happened, it just became too much for Buffalo, and they crumbled. And I think that now with a whole new season, whole new aspect, with DeMar coming back, maybe he does play, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's just a coach. You know, with everything else, I think it's just right now, I think you're going to see a team become a family. And they have become a family, don't get me wrong, but I think you're going to see more of that family aspect where they're playing for one another rather than just playing for themselves.
BB Dubs, what up? Marty, what do you think of Shorter? Yeah, what do you think of Shorter now in that offense? Do you have high expectations, or?
I think that he's going to be more of the remember a few years ago when Gabe Davis came into the league, and you know, he wasn't the number 2 receiver. He was just that guy that every now and then he came to the field and he got you know, a big play downfield. I think that's going to be more of what Justin Shorter is going to be in his first year. Now, when I watched a lot of tape on Anthony Richardson, this kid showed up every single time. And I'm like, who is this kid? You know, who's this Shorter type of guy? And then when Buffalo came and picked him in the draft, I'm like, okay, I understand the move now. Like, he's making plays left and right, and he's more of a vertical threat to the Bills, which is something that we really struggled with because we were trying to get the ball to Gabe Davis on go routes almost every single time, and Gabe doesn't have the route tree like Stephon Diggs does. So, I mean, if you watch Gabe Davis, it's usually a go route, a post, or even like a drag route. That's mostly what he runs. So now you have Justin Shorter, who can, if he runs a post route, he can run that go route on the same side in the slot position, and Josh can put the ball to him because he's so fast. And he also he's 6'4", 210 pounds as well. So he can be that vertical threat in the end zone too on the fade routes, which is something that you saw at Florida. So he brings you the aspect of being the tall receiver for the Buffalo Bills, which is something that I think we needed for a few years.
Yeah, I like that. I don't know what he's going to be for the future. Like you said, maybe he's just going to be a splash play, kind of guy. But I wasn't too high on Shorter really even coming in.
Yeah.
So kind of just a mad to me, but we'll see. I mean, he's got opportunity in that offense, I feel like, because there's not really anybody there outside of Diggs,
right,
like we've been saying. So, there is some opportunity if he can, make a name for himself. Now, we spoke a little bit earlier. You were talking about the YAC, right? The yards after catch, which is another reason why I do like Cook a little bit more this year, especially with Josh Allen saying he doesn't want to run as much. That could open up some more dump offs instead of him just taking off. So what do you think about that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that James Cook is going to go off this year. I think he's going to be more in tune of closer to 1,000 yards this season, to be honest with you. But it just depends on what Buffalo's going to do. Are they going to run the ball a little bit more than they did last year? I don't know. I do think that they have better running backs than they did last year, personally, and I think that they could gain more yards overall. But it just depends on what they want to do. I think they're going to try and pass the ball about 70% of the time. And I think that you are going to see more out of Gabe Davis. If you look at last year, I know that you said you're a Gabe Davis hater. I'm more of a hater than I am a lover, but I'm not a hater yet. Because one thing I like about Gabe Davis is the game that he had in the playoffs where he had 4 touchdowns. That's the Gabe Davis I think I love. That's why I love him still.
Yeah. That's real Gabe Davis.
That's the real Gabe Davis. That's the Gabe Davis that I want to see versus Gabe Davis that got, he had 50% catch rate last year. That pissed me off. Not going to lie. I think that the expectations that we saw from Gabe Davis just because of what he did in the playoff game against Kansas City, I think that the expectations were way too high. Think about this.
I agree.
This was his first year being the number 2 wide receiver. Everybody needs to just calm down and, take into effect what he did last year. He had over 800 yards, which is pretty good. I think he had 6 touchdowns last year. Good numbers for a first year being a number 2 wide receiver. Those are pretty good numbers. They're not perfect or anything. I would love to have him at 1,000 yards, but that's just the start. Before I think he had he was 300 or 400 yards this season. I think the expectations now should shift to let's get him to 1,000 yards. Let's get him 7 touchdowns, 8 touchdowns, somewhere in that range. And let's, make him the number 2 wide receiver because he is a free agent after this year. So one thing I was going to tie into Justin Shorter too is if you are looking at next year, and I think that that's what the move with Justin Shorter is all about, is if we don't go after a DeAndre Hopkins, if we don't go after anybody like that, can Justin Shorter fill in for Davis next year and become the number 2 wide receiver? That's why I think his numbers are going to be very low this year. And then next year he can compete for the number 2 wide receiver role. But I think that you're going to see Gabe Davis get 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and I think he's going to move on from Buffalo. I think there's just not enough money to move around. He's going to command $15 to $20 million, which is, in my opinion, a little too much for Gabe, just in my opinion right now. But I think once it all comes down to everything, it's going to be well worth it because he's going to have a monster year.
I think the biggest issue I have with Gabe Davis, and I know relatively speaking, he's still young, right? He's going into his 4th year, and I think Steve will attest to this too. Is I think the point you brought up is the absolute nail on the head, where we saw that 4 touchdown game against Kansas City on the national stage, and we all expected him to just take that next leap and have 1,200 yards and 8, 9, 10 touchdowns, and that just didn't happen. But for me, I look at it a little bit deeper, where the consistency from game to game, and he just lacked consistency. And I actually took a look at the game log just to refresh my memory, and he only had 4 weeks where he was in the top 20 of wide receiver in points. And that just won't get it done. All those other weeks is like wide receiver 66, wide receiver 87, 45, 61, 46, like all in that area. And, if he had 800 yards, but it was a little more consistent, it really was like 3 or 4 good games and then 12 games where you're just like, where the hell is he? So if it was more on a consistent basis and he still had those same numbers, I would look at him a little bit differently.
Right. And he was hampered by an ankle injury during the season too. So you don't really know if that had something to do with what, the reason why he was a wide receiver 46 or he was in the 60s. Maybe, that was affecting him and he wasn't able to run certain routes and everything. So, he had the high ankle sprain, and I think that's why you didn't see the Gabe Davis make it into the 1,200 yards or even more than he was gonna, because I know that some expectations were he was going to have over 2,000 yards and 48 touchdowns, or not even 48 touchdowns, but 68 touchdowns in the season. That's what, Cynthia Freeland of NFL Network would have said, because of, taking the number from one game
touchdowns and had 200 yards. Yeah.
So, no, just kidding around on that. But,
I mean, he had a lot of air yards. He was,
he did.
almost 1,400 air yards because they were throwing it to him deep.
Yeah.
I think the main concern with me is, again, the route tree, the separation, and more importantly, the target share. I mean, on an offense that good, I mean, he had 18% target share. It's just not enough for what we want. I think we just should realize maybe this is what Gabe Davis is: 800, 900 receiving yards, maybe 6, 7 touchdowns. That's kind of where he's going to be at. I don't know, how much more of a ceiling like there is. Maybe he has some more touchdowns this year. I don't know, but I mean, I think again, it's be more of product of the situation than his actual talent. And again, if he does do what he did this year, I mean, which isn't crazy bad. I mean, 800 yards, 7 touchdowns, but they're not going to pay him what he's going to demand in the market. Like, it wouldn't make sense to. You might as well just get somebody else, or like you said, maybe Shorter steps in, or Shakir, or maybe they draft someone else or pick up someone else next year. So yeah, I don't see him really in there. It doesn't make sense to pay him.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's just, I like him. I think he's going to be this year. I expect 65% of his catches to be caught. I really do. I think that the biggest thing is he needs to look at the jug. He needs to work on the jug machine, and he needs to work on just catching the ball. And he's a tough guy. Like I said, he's somebody that's a hard worker. He comes to work, wants to be better every single week. I think the expectations were a little too much overall throughout the season, and I think he's going to be better than he was last year. I really do, because I think that Knox and Kincaid are going to take a little bit of pressure off of him, which is something that will help. So I think overall he's going to have he'll have around 1,000 yards. It'll be right around 1,000 yards, which is good numbers, overall. And I think he'll ride off into another team and get a really good deal from another team.
Yeah, I can see that. For sure. Then where do we go? Where do you go from there next year, right? Who are you bringing in then? I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch more free agents out there that will be, who else do they get?
Yeah, and then Diggs will be another year older, which he's starting to kind of climb up there a little bit. He's a phenomenal receiver.
Who's an interesting guy for me? I just recorded a video that'll come out tomorrow on him, but Darnell Mooney is a guy that will be a free agent next year. And I think a good spot would be a team like the Bills that need a wide receiver. He's not a number one, so working across from Diggs kind of fits perfectly like what Mooney is or what he could be. So I think that's actually an interesting good target possibly, for next year.
Yeah, I agree. Give me my puppy is being a little bad and trying to get into some stuff, so I apologize about that, but I just heard an oh bleep, and I'm like, okay, I gotta mute that real quick because we got a 9-month-old golden retriever that just wants to get into every freaking thing you can possibly imagine, and
bouncing off the walls.
Oh yeah,
just like any other one, just like any other of these dogs. But yeah, what do you think about Mooney? Do you think that would be kind of a good option for you, Hammer? You too. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean,
I love Mooney. I think that he's a really good receiver. I just want to see whoever comes into Buffalo. I want to see somewhere in the range of 1,000 yards for a number 2 wide receiver. If you get me to there, I'll be thrilled. And I do think that we need to have somebody that brings a little bit of a blocking aspect into the game too, which is something that you haven't seen a lot with these receivers. So, is Mooney the answer? Maybe, maybe not, because like I said, I haven't. If I look back at Gabe Davis and what he does for an offense. He's a vertical threat, but he can't block. And when you did bring in guys that could block, it was Jake Kumaro, who I know you remember him from.
I know who Jake Kumaro is. Yes, I do.
You know damn well he was a good blocker. So
you had to be if you were going to get on that roster. Yeah.
He couldn't catch the freaking ball though. He could catch the ball, but he couldn't really do anything. Yeah, he had the one touchdown with Josh Allen. He had 100% catch rate overall with Josh Allen, and then they started throwing the ball to him a little too much last year and didn't work out. But he's somebody that could block really well, and that's something that I'm looking at for a wide receiver is if you can block and you can also become a threat as number 2 wide receiver. That's what if you have all the aspects of the game, that's something that I'm looking at for a receiver. But a lot of these guys don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like Mooney on that offense because he's very shifty, he's very dynamic. A couple of years ago when he had that kind of breakout season, we looked at him and we were just like, this guy can really play, I mean, he was obviously on a limited Bears offense at that time and then suffered the injury. But yeah, I like Mooney. He's a little undersized, but I do think he can make plays. I think he kind of surprises you with his catch radius a little bit because you're like, how the hell did he catch that? So I do like Mooney. I think there are some other guys. If you're looking for that pass blocking plus receiving type guy, I think there are maybe some other options out there. Can't really think of them off the top of my head, but Mooney will be an interesting one from a strictly, catch the ball perspective.
Yeah, I'll throw out a couple guys that I think that will become available very shortly. I mean, it's not going to be this year, but in the next couple of years, Mike Evans.
I was just going to say him.
Yeah, I think he's going to become available very shortly on the trade market. And putting him next to Diggs, Evans is getting older. He's put up 1,000-yard seasons for, I believe it's 8 or 7 straight seasons with the Bucks. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just going to come down to, does he want to win a championship again? Does he want to win another one? And he doesn't want to be a part of a rebuild with the Bucks for, you don't know how long it's going to be. Do the Bucks tank this year with Baker Mayfield, and do they go after Caleb Williams in the draft? That's debatable. Or is it going to take a couple more years to rebuild? Because there's a lot of pieces that are in place on that roster that they're going to have to move on from, and one of them is going to have to be Mike Evans. You also have Levante David, who's getting old too. So, and the defense, I mean, they invested a lot of money in that defense, and there's going to be some contracts that come up that they're going to need to pay. So I think it's just going to be tough for them for a few years. So I think Mike Evans is going to go somewhere else. Another guy that I really liked that we didn't go after was Adam Thielen. I love I just think that overall with everything that happened in Minnesota, that's why we didn't go after Thielen. But I'm trying to think of other guys as well.
Thielen would have been
good. I'll throw out a guy that I really want Buffalo to go after if he becomes available this year is Hunter Renfrow. I mean, if he becomes available,
a perfect little slot for you. Yeah.
Kind of like that Cole Beasley.
Yeah.
Kind of guy.
He's the new version of Cole Beasley, and I think he would really fit into what Buffalo is trying to do on offense. So even in the comments, you have Keenan Allen too. He's another guy.
Allen, there you go, 2024.
But, can Keenan Allen stay healthy? That's the problem. And I'm looking at more of a guy that can stay on the field, get on the field, and make plays. And Mike Evans has done that routinely. Can he keep his temper under control? That's debatable. Yeah.
As long as he doesn't play Marshawn Lattimore, I think he's good.
Well, listen, as long as you don't fuck with his quarterback, you're good.
I mean, listen, I'll say this. The Bills have needed a nasty player on their team for years because I'm going to say it on here because I know you've cussed, but the last motherfucker that was on the team that made a big play and actually went after different players was Richie Incognito, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. John Felicio did it a little bit, but Richie Incognito brought some cockiness to the team, and he brought an attitude as a bully. and you feared going after Richie Incognito. So he's the guy that I really like, and I think that if you can bring some attitude to the Bills, just enough to bring that intensity,
I like it.
I think Mike Evans would do really good.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
And just holding players accountable too.
When Mike Evans, the last one that happened with Mike Evans and Tom Brady, and he went up to the ref and he was like, "That's Tom Brady. What you want me to do?"
Exactly. Yeah. I even agreed with him. I'm like, you don't mess with Tom Brady. You just don't. Like, there's a golden rule in the NFL. It's the Brady rules.
He's the golden boy. Yep.
Try and
was it Winston, the one where he came fucking running and clobbered the dude on the sideline? Was it?
That was again with Winston, where he ran across the field and clobbered him.
Oh my god, he fucking yeah.
And even oh my god, who was it? The guy that like went after CJ Gardner-Johnson like a couple years ago when he was with Cincinnati, and then he slapped at him and then tried to fight him, and he didn't go after him. You remember that? I was trying to remember that. It was in a game like a couple years ago, and I looked at it. I'm like, damn, he actually he doesn't even want to fight. Like, you know, he tries to act all tough, and he didn't want to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got one more question before we go. And Hammer, if you got any last questions. We were talking about emotion before with Josh Allen. What do you think about the emotion of Stephon Diggs, though? I mean, I'm a Vikings fan, so I've been through it where he just bitches and moans like a baby. And you know, it is annoying at times, especially like in the playoff game where, you know, everybody's watching and you're going off on the sideline, you know, to your QB because you're not getting the football, instead of, you know, saying, come on, bro, like, let's lock in. Like, what are you seeing? You know, how can we fucking turn this around? So that was one thing that actually annoyed me, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on Diggs and his emotion, you know, that we saw.
Well, when they did it in the playoff game, my TV actually cut to the Burger King commercial with the Whoppers on. No, I didn't see it. No, I'm kidding when I say that. So, no, does it bother me? Yeah, not gonna lie. But is it the emotional part of the game that, you know, it's tough? You know, do I agree with Diggs for getting pissed off? Yeah, he didn't get the ball enough in the game. That's plain and simple. He didn't get the ball enough. I don't blame him for getting pissed because it wasn't just that game. Go back weeks before that, and there's times where Diggs was open and he didn't get the ball. And then there's times in that game where he was double or triple covered in those situations, and he may have felt like he was open. He wasn't. And I put a lot of the blame on the Cincinnati game on Diggs. But the other games, I put it all on Josh Allen. He did not see Diggs enough and did not give him the opportunities to make plays in the games. He kind of shut off of Diggs a little bit too much towards the end of the season. And I do think that they're going to reconcile their relationship. I think it's more blown up a little bit too much with the media and stuff like that. I was honestly going to post a video about it saying that he was a distraction for the Bills, and I don't think he is. I really do. Looking back at it, I think he it's just more about football. And I think that Josh and Diggs will figure it out. They're both smart guys, don't get me wrong. But as a leader on a team, that's what pisses me off more than anything. You don't do that. That's the thing that pisses me off, because we've all played sports, and the crybaby aspect of the game it's just annoying. It bothers the other players around you. You know, I look over there and I go, hey, that guy's being a little bitch, to be honest with you. Like, that's what I think. I'm like, he's being a little bitch. Like, start throwing me the ball. Like, I'm going to make plays. But
that's how I felt. That's how I felt, because, like you said, he's a leader, right? You're supposed to be leading the team, especially in the playoffs, and you just got to know you can't act like that. Instead, get everybody together. Like, all right, guys, what are we seeing out there? How can we be better? You know, how can you know, why am I not getting the ball? Are you not seeing me? Am I not open in your eyes? Like, what is it that's going on? How can we fix it? And let's make the adjustments. instead of just, blowing up on the sideline. Like, that's the part, like you said, that I hate about it, especially as a leader, where everybody else on the team is kind of, looking up to you. And it's like, all right, what the fuck? And now you're just kind of going out there without the fluidity, without the, the feeling that everybody's in and on the same page and all that. So
Right.
you can't do that in the playoffs. You can't do that against these good teams.
When the emotions become high, that's when you need to really step up. And I think that if you would have just seen him go over to Josh and like huddle the team around, like you said, I would have been perfectly okay with that. I would have said, hey, man, this guy's really grown up from Minnesota and he's becoming a leader. He's making the right choices. He's actually wants to get the team together and do something big. But it just seemed like, it was more of like a temper tantrum type of situation, in my opinion, on national TV. And it was embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's the best way to put it. That is the best way to put it. Kind of like Antonio Brown on the sideline.
I was just going to say, he almost pulled in Antonio Brown.
Not quite to that extent, but.
No, I mean, hey, listen, Antonio Brown was the best Buffalo Bills player for, 6 hours that he was with the team. He worked his ass off. He was his first ballot Hall of Famer. Came to work every day, worked his ass off, and I'm glad he was a Buffalo Bill, to be honest with you. Try saying that with a straight face.
That almost flew over my head.
I'm just trying to see if you remembered what happened.
It grasped it. I don't remember the exact reference that I was trying to figure it out what that reference kind of. So I was trying to pull it.
The reference was he got traded from Pittsburgh to Buffalo. He was traded overnight, so we got the blockbuster news when I fell asleep. Like, I was just falling asleep, that he was traded to the Bills, and then he refused to go to the Bills, and the trade was called off. So
and that's when he went to Oakland.
He didn't like Josh Allen, blah blah blah. Like, didn't want to be with the Bills. Then after that, Buffalo said, fuck you. We're gonna go after Stephon Diggs instead. So that's when they went after Stephon Diggs. They got the trade there. But then Antonio Brown ended up going to the Raiders and had all the all the
called the GM a cracker, made headlines.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was going more after, like, I think the time frame that it was literally 10 or 6 hours that he was with the Bills. So they call it, like, in Buffalo, it's like the greatest free agency move of all time is Antonio Brown being a Buffalo Bill for 6 hours.
That's hilarious. That is hilarious. All right, so I got one more question before we get you out of here. Top 5 AFC quarterbacks heading into the 2023-24 NFL season.
Do you want to do both divisions? Because I can do that too for you.
It's up to you. I just threw out top 5 AFC. You're a Buffalo guy, so I was going to throw out AFC because it feels a little tougher in the AFC because there's so many good quarterbacks, but take it away.
Okay. So overall, I'm going to start at number 5 for the AFC.
Okay.
And I got Aaron Rodgers at number 5.
Okay.
Number 4, I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. I really do think that there's some big expectations from him this year. I think he's going to put up some monster numbers. 3, I have Josh Allen. I think that, overall, you've seen a lot from the top 2 guys that I'm going to name. I mean, you can debate it, but 2 is going to be Joe Burrow, and 1 is going to be Patrick Mahomes. I think that's just how it shapes up. I do think overall that Josh Allen has the most upside of all the guys on the list. Don't get me wrong. I just think that Joe Burrow has done some really big things over the last couple of years, and he's taken his team to deeper in the playoffs, and that's why I think he's just ahead of Josh Allen right now. And I think he's going to put up a monster year with 3 amazing wide receivers that he has around him again this year. So he just has a better roster overall compared to Josh Allen. He also is putting on a rookie deal, which is, I'd say it's a little unfair, in those situations, but it's just the way that it works. We didn't get it done when Josh was on his rookie deal, and we put together good teams around him. We just didn't finish it off. So now this is what Buffalo is paying. Is we had to pay one wide receiver big money to be around him, and now we're gonna have to figure it out the rest of the way. But that's just what it comes down to. And then for the NFC, I mean, that's really, really tough to go about. But I'd say Justin Fields has to be on the list. Just because, I mean, Justin Fields as a quarterback overall, I'm not saying he's the best quarterback in terms of throwing the ball. It's every aspect that he does. You know, that's the factors that he can play into being a mobile quarterback as a runner too. You know, that's something that I put into the aspect. I'd even put up there. I mean, there really isn't a lot of guys in the AFC, to be honest with you.
There's not.
I mean, I just got to think about it. Dak has to be up there too. You know,
yeah.
Dak has to be 3. I mean, really, it comes down to Hurts. I mean, Jalen Hurts has to be like number 1 up there.
Gotta be number 1, yeah.
Agreed.
It really comes down to who else do you have on that list? And I mean, looking at
Dak, Geno, Kirk Cousins.
Kirk Cousins, yeah, I put Kirk at 4. Yeah, I put him over Justin Fields. Wouldn't you?
Jared Goff.
No, Dak. What would we say, Dak?
I put
Dak.
Yeah,
I would put Dak.
I think Dak is number 2.
Dak at 3.
3?
Yeah, 3, in my opinion. I mean, I do think that there's better ones out there. I mean, whoever starts.
I know Dak hasn't got it done as an NFL quarterback for the Cowboys as far as winning playoff games and getting to the Super Bowl. But, I mean, let's not kid ourselves what he is for fantasy. I mean, he finishes as a captain guy every single season. He had a bad season last season because he threw a lot of intos and didn't wind up playing the whole season. But before that, I mean, we weren't looking at Dak like he was ass. I mean, you know, like I said, as an NFL QB, yes, he hasn't got them to where they need to go. But, I mean, who the fuck has for the Cowboys?
That's true.
I mean, Tony Romo, but I mean, you know, we're worried about the fantasy aspect, and again, like, I mean, would the Cowboys ever move off of Dak? I don't think that makes any sense. There's not anybody that's better out there. I mean, so yeah, I feel like Dak is a safe, especially in fantasy, a pretty safe quarterback for the next while.
What if instead of having Dak, I mean, what if they went after Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr? You know, I'd put. I don't think it's a big upgrade overall. I don't. I think the Dak brings you the same things. I put Derek Carr on the list of top 5. To be honest with you, just being that he's in the NFC, I think there's going to be some big numbers from him.
Yeah,
I think with the lack of depth at the quarterback position in the NFC, I could see him being, you know, in that 5-ish range for the NFC wise. But I'm a Cowboys fan. He's ass.
What about Geno Smith? Did you put him on the list?
I got to see it again.
Yeah,
I got to see it again. I got to see another year from Geno. Yeah, because if you remember, he faded down the stretch of the season a little bit. They got lucky to get in the playoffs because the Packers shit the bed against the Lions, or else the Seahawks wouldn't have even made the playoffs.
So, in my opinion, here's how I take it with Geno. If Geno puts up the similar numbers to what he did last year, he has to be on the list. But I mean, it really comes down to
argument.
I mean, it really comes down to what type of Geno you're going to see, and
they have the talent around him.
They do. They have great talent around him. But you know, if you look back at it, I mean, imagine if the trade with Russell Wilson would have went to Philadelphia, then Jalen Hurts goes to the Seahawks, and you don't even hear about the great season that Geno played. So, you don't even know if he's going to be a good quarterback ever again, if he even makes it to being a starter. So,
that's really interesting. Some interesting guys you left off of the AFC: Trevor Lawrence, Lamar Jackson. So that's just how loaded that
But it's
conference
loaded.
is
You got somebody. You got to miss somebody, right? I mean,
So just some notable guys. Yeah.
Is Lamar more of a pocket passer or more of a runner? Yeah,
We're gonna find out this year.
well, I think that might change this year. But I mean, I pretty much had it the same way. I mean, how you said it. I mean,
and you can move. You could honestly.
you could argue with Rodgers and T. Law or Lamar Jackson, but
Yeah,
I don't know if you can argue the first four guys, right? I mean, Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, and Herbert. I don't know. For me, those are kind of stapled in 1 to 4 almost, you know.
And then also we haven't mentioned this name, Deshaun Watson.
Oh yeah, Deshaun Watson too. We have that's another one.
Deshaun's only good at one thing, and that's turning over. I'm just saying, he's just good at turning over, bro.
Oh man, but yeah, Deshaun Watson is another one. So yeah, a lot of good QBs.
It's loaded. It is loaded.
A lot of good QBs over there. But all right, I guess that's gonna do it for us tonight. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Brett, appreciate you for coming on. Just let them know again where they can find you, at.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you guys for having me on. It's awesome show. Anytime you guys want to do it, let's do it again. So throughout the season, you guys are always welcome. Or if you want to come over to Go Bills podcast and jump on there with me, more than welcome to. But you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter at Go Bills Podcast, and on our website, gobillspodcast.com. And then we also are doing shows with the Nickel City Mafia and Red, White, and Bills. We'll be on their channels as well. And then we also have another channel that we're doing on YouTube called the AFC East Summit, where we talk with other members of the AFC, and we kind of talk shit pretty much to each other and say why our teams are the best and why Josh Allen's going to win the division for the 5th straight year.
We do this on this show routinely because I'm a Packers fan. He's a Vikings fan. So that's we love that. We love that.
And the Lions are going to win the division.
I can see that. I can see that.
I can see that too. I can see that too.
Yep. Brett, it's been a pleasure, man. This is really good stuff from you, man. Definitely appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, guys. Anytime you guys want to have me on, whether it's talking Bills stuff or you guys just want to talk fantasy stuff, let's do it again. I'd love to be on the show.
Definitely. We're about to get out of here again, guys. Appreciate y'all. Smash that like, smash that subscribe if you're new, and we'll see you on the next one.